Hi, and welcome to Series 4 of the Australia Academy Down History Revision podcast. This series is going to focus on the superpower relations, i.e. the Cold War. As always, if you've not listened to any of these podcasts before, these are aimed to be between 5 and 10 minutes long, just to give you a little bit of a taste, a little bit of an injection of what's going on in each particular topic. It's not supposed to replace any other revision, your books, any timelines, cue cards, anything like that you've made before. This is just an extra little bonus to give you that little bit of information. If you haven't checked out the other podcasts that we've got available, Series 1 focuses on medicine through time and the Western Front. Series 2 focuses on Weimar and Nazi Germany. And Series 3 focuses on early Elizabethan England. Okay, Cold War, let's get started. So this is episode 5 of the Cold War series, and we'll focus on the 1970s. Now, the 1970s, for the most part, we see a real change in attitude and change in shift with how the tensions are between the two sides. The 1970s sees a period known as détente. So this is a period of relaxation and tensions between both the USA and the USSR, mainly because I think both sides kind of looked at what happened in the 60s and thought, whoa, we need to do something here. This is getting a little bit out of hand. We need to sort of relax everything. The acts that were put in place after Cuba clearly weren't working. They weren't sufficient enough, and so something new needed to be put in place. More was needed from both sides to secure this peace and the non-nuclear war. So the first agreement that gets put in place becomes known as SALT, or SALT 1. Okay, so SALT stands for the Strategic Arms Limitations Talks. What they agree is that both sides will only be allowed 2 missile sites, and within each of these missile sites they're only allowed 100 missiles. So this is putting an actual number on it. So whereas the previous limitation bans put in place simply said you're not allowed to explode them, but you could keep building them. Now, no, you're allowed 100 on this site, 100 on that site, no more. There's a 5-year freeze on making new missiles. You're not allowed to develop anything new now. What you've got is what you need to stick with. The only downside to this is that although you can't develop any more bombs and you can't have any more launch sites, you can continue to construct bomber aircraft who would be able to carry those bombs and drop them Hiroshima style. So although then again, there's another loophole here with SALT 1. The next thing that really starts to happen is we see the first state visit from an American president to Moscow, and this is Richard Nixon. So Nixon actually visits Moscow twice. He goes in 1972 and then 1974. This is about positive PR. This is about showing that America and the Soviet Union are getting along. It's handshakes on the TV, and it just helps to ease the fears of the civilians who are worried about another Cuba or something like this maybe possibly happening. So it's the idea that, they can see on the TV screen that their president is in Moscow, they can see that their premier is meeting Nixon, and it just made everyone feel a little bit more at ease. In 1974, the second meeting then, both Nixon and Brezhnev agreed to work together, specifically on economic and scientific areas, to share ideas about moving forward in those particular fields. Then in 1975, we get the Helsinki Agreements. This is not just America and the USSR. There are 35 countries present at this meeting, and when they get there, they're there to discuss 3 things. There's 3 areas that they want to nail down. The first one is security. Okay, and one of the big things that comes from the Helsinki Agreement is that the USSR accept West Germany as a nation. Okay, it's something that Stalin was very much against. It created the Berlin blockade when Trizonia first came into being, and then when it became West Germany, it became a real sort of source of antagonising the USSR that this nation existed. But from Helsinki in 1975, West Germany is now accepted as a nation by the Soviet Union. The second thing they're looking at is cooperation, sharing technology, sharing trade links, trying to unite the world, if you like, in those sort of areas. And the final thing is human rights, and all these nations agreeing to respect the freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Again, just easing tensions and just making the ordinary man in the street just feel a little bit more safe in the world. The final agreement comes a few years later, so this is SALT II. Okay, now obviously the fact that there's a SALT II tells us that SALT I clearly wasn't good enough, and they needed to develop it. Now this was signed in 1979, but it actually started in 1974, so this is 5 years worth of talks to get to this point. And what they agree at SALT II is that, first of all, each nation will have a limit of 2,400 intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs. Both agree to build no more launch sites. There'll be no more of them. And this agreement is in place for 6 years, so it doesn't end until 1985 with the creation of the Second Cold War and Ronald Reagan. The problem is, how do you monitor something like this? There are other sites. Cuba, for example, has still got troops in it. And so America kind of looked at this and said, yeah, we've signed it, but I don't see how it's going to work. Again, just too many loopholes. It wasn't specific enough, really. Then we come on to our final major event of the 1970s. And it's right at the end of the 1970s, so it kind of pushes into the 1980s, but I'm going to include it in this podcast. And this is the invasion of Afghanistan. Now, again, as I mentioned in previous recordings, when we looked at the 50s and the later 1960s with Hungary and Czechoslovakia, it follows the same process. Okay, so you've got a strong communist in charge, a more liberal, weaker communist takes over, challenges the Soviet Union invade, Soviet Union win, and there are consequences. And it follows exactly the same system. Okay, so Afghanistan's not part of the sphere of influence. Okay, they're not part of the Eastern Bloc, but the Soviet Union has interest in them because it's their access to the Middle East, to oil and things like that. Now, a neighbouring nation of Afghanistan, Iran, has a takeover, and they are taken over by a Muslim fundamentalist group. And Brezhnev is just a little bit worried about the possible domino effect of extreme fundamental Muslims taking over into Afghanistan. If they take over to Afghanistan, what's to stop them taking over into the Soviet Union? And he's just a little bit concerned. So what we almost see here really is Brezhnev doing a Truman and worrying about containment and helping a nation nearby stop them from doing that. So Taraki takes over Afghanistan. He's a strong communist, he's an ally to Brezhnev, and that's going to solve the problem. However, in September 1979, Taraki is assassinated by Amin, and Amin seized control. Now, he is somebody who is not under the influence of the Soviet Union, and in fact, Amin starts to enter discussions with the USA about trade deals and things like that. So what we essentially have here is a reverse Cuba. Whereas Cuba, shunned America and started talking to the USSR, well, Afghanistan are now shunning the USSR and starting to talk to the USA. So this is Brezhnev's Bay of Pigs, for want of a better phrase, but he's a little bit more successful. So on Christmas Day, 1979, Brezhnev sends in 50,000 troops into Afghanistan. He then sends a further 35,000, making it to 85,000 to make sure the job gets done. Amin is assassinated and is replaced by Karmal, who is a strong communist leader and will unite with the Soviet Union and shun any trade links with America. Once again, America failed to act. They don't get involved. They voice their concerns like they did with Czechoslovakia. And what we do get something called the Carter Doctrine that kind of comes out from this. We also get the Olympic ban, but because they happened in the 1980s, I'm going to focus on them in the next podcast and leave that one there for us. So that is the 1970s all done and dusted. Once again, thank you for listening. The fact that you're listening tells me that you're taking your revision seriously. Make sure you check out the other episodes if you haven't already done so, and make sure you also listen to the Elizabeth ones, because don't forget, on paper 2 you have got Elizabeth as well as Cold War. There's also series 2 on Nazi Germany, and the series 1 is looking at medicine, so make sure you check them out as well. Well done guys, keep on revising, keep working hard, it is worth it in the end, trust me. Good luck and keep going.